Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 246 of Kouryer podcast. Our today's guest is Mr. Martin Teichmann. He's a lead environment artist at Crystal Dynamics based in Los Angeles, United States. And of course, before we go into the signature questions of the podcast, so let me quickly mention that in the for contact section of the captions, you can find his Instagram ID, the links to his art station and Twitter, and in the bio of his art station or about section, you can find more links. So I didn't want to spam so many links in the description. You can go figure it out if you want to. And with that being said, how are we doing today?
Hi, I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me to the show today.
Oh, my pleasure. And all right, so let's start off with the first question, the signature, which is kind of like the signature question of the podcast, where I start off every episode with, which is, give us a little introduction on how we got into the world of visual arts and design. Basically, tell us your origin story, if you know how you became an artist, basically.
Sure, of course, yeah. So I think for me it was actually a little bit the other way around. When I was like a kid or a teenager, I started playing video games. I was like really fascinated by that, and I was like thinking, okay, I really want to work in video games in the future. So how do I get there? And my first instinct was to get into programming, because that was the obvious answer. Like games are programmed, so you have to kind of learn programming. So I pursued that. I went to advanced school, to learn about programming and stuff. And as I was doing that, I kind of noticed that in my little side projects that I was doing, I think ages ago, I started to program in Visual Basic, actually, a little RPG game, and I noticed that I started to put more and more time in like the graphics or backgrounds rather than the actual programming of these things. And with programming, I mean, it was super basic, so it's nothing I would share around these days. But that's basically like a thing that I kind of noticed. I spent more and more time in the visuals and the graphic and the appearance. And I picked up like a 3D software package. It's called 3D Game Studio, that was based on Quake 2 engine that came out, or that was out there. That was like a video game builder kit before Unreal and Unity engine were widely available. And I started working with that for a couple of years until I finally got into games. So I think for me, the main thing was to really kind of get into video games. And as I was going on my path, I kind of realized that the visuals and the level of art was really where my passion was. So I pursued that, and that was like the beginning of my career in games.
All right. And were you originally studying art and design, like from the beginning? Of course, you kind of briefly mentioned, how things started, but like, let's say when you were in high school, were you originally the plan was to go to the art route, or there was another career path that you might have, thought about, and you were thinking of having art as a hobby,
Yeah, for some reason, I was always thinking about it as a hobby. So especially back then, it sounds like it's so long ago, but it's just 15 years ago. But there was not really any kind of universities that would teach like game art in general, or it was more like then it would be maybe a class or something. But as I was saying earlier, the career path for me was more like in tech, in programming at the time, because that's where I thought it's the most realistic kind of chance to learn how, or to become a developer in video games. And also there were of course like art classes at universities. You could do like proper art class, like traditional art and stuff like that, or for movies and stuff. But that really didn't struck me because I was not in when I was like a child or when I was a kid, I was not really this guy that would like constantly paint or draw. That was not really me. So I was really intimidated by pursuing like an art university kind of a degree, because I heard about the portfolios and the application process, and it didn't really struck my mind to even kind of try to pursue that. So I went straight into computer science back then, especially in my first university degree. I actually switched my majors later on, but the first one was even heavy tech driven, with all the logic and assembler coding and stuff like that, which I then learned was a little bit too complex for me. But there was like always kind of my career path that I thought is makes the most sense. It's like this, and even though of course there are great careers in games, as I later on figured out, but at the time in Germany, there were a couple of studios. There was Crytek around. There was a couple of other studios, but it didn't really seem as like this kind of natural career to go for. So going into computer science programming was also like almost like a little bit like playing it safe. What if it's not working out? I always have this degree. I can do whatever else. I can work in automotive. I could work in other more traditional, maybe more boring kind of industries. And maybe also said that my family background, like my parents, they're both engineers, like a very German kind of career, right? But there was like always like a little bit like an then kind of direction for me that I just pursued. And as I was going, I think that's where the true passion came out. And that's where I noticed that, that the art aspect of making games is really what fascinated me.
All right. And what is your main branch of design that you're focusing on right now? I mean, and also tell us about your experience from the start of it until now. I mean, of course, in the introduction, I mentioned that you're an environment artist, so we all know that. But basically, this question is the extension of my first question. Like, that was how you became an artist, but now, what path now you took from becoming an artist to like a specialized artist in this field, which is environment art? And of course, I need to quickly mention that something as well. That actually, the way I think found your works, I think 2 months ago you posted a antique shop Unreal Engine 5 environment, and I think I saw it on like here's the thing with the like I don't know, I'm just saying it with environment art. Usually when someone does something really interesting or there's something unique about the environment in general, it's posted everywhere. Twitter, LinkedIn, and I think that went a little bit viral, and I think I found your stuff through there. And which of course I actually love that environment, by the way. It looks really awesome. And so basically, how did you kind of found your path to where you are now?
Yeah, so I think coming back to like this little 3D game studio kind of experience, this game engine, which because based off like really old school tech, level design is basically environment art, like because you put in some boxes and that's all you can do because of the restrictions of the processing power of the CPU and GPUs and stuff like that. And that's something that I really enjoy doing, like building the spaces, building the worlds, and ultimately the environments. And as tech moved on and became more interesting, like because you can put more details in, it also became like really apparent that more and more storytelling is able to get into these spaces, and that's something that I really enjoyed doing as well. Sorry, which is not just only the kind of visual quality, it's also like the story behind the space. And I think that's something that really intrigued me, especially when I played games at the time, especially a lot of kind of first person shooters, like I would say like the old school ones, like Half-Life 2, maybe even Unreal 2, like these kind of old school shooters. They were like very story driven. They were at the time not only beautiful and leading tech, but they were also like trying with the resources they have, like tell awesome stories just within the environments and the mood and the lighting and where you put props and textures and stuff like that. And I think that really clicked with me. So it's not only about making a scene beautiful and believable, but also about telling a story. So when you walk into a space, you get a sense who was living there or what happened here maybe before you as a player entered this room. And that's something that I think it really struck me. And that's something that I pursued. And I think to maybe break it down, like my specialty or like where I feel like I'm more or less mostly like really focused on is the world building aspect. So I do like making props and textures, but the best part of any game production or the best part of making a scene for me is basically taking a bunch of assets and then just assemble a world or scene or room out of it and try to tell a story within that. That's where my passion really lies.
All right. And now speaking of that, how does your design process usually go anytime you want to start working on a new project, like a design project or just a project in general? Like, because, like, let's say, of course, you're an environment artist. Like, what does the structure of your pipeline usually look like? Because I'm actually doing a course, like, for the past couple of months by, like, an environment art mastery course by Tiago Klafke. I don't know if you know him.
Oh yeah, I know him.
And
Awesome guy. Yeah.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Used to work for Blizzard, and he's a good friend of mine that worked at Crytek and then worked at Blizzard. We're just spending some time together a couple of years ago. Yeah, he's great.
All right. Awesome. And the thing is, in his course, he has a hierarchy of, how to step by step, how to work on environment, like there's that, like, I'm saying this very roughly, not exactly accurate, but like first you start with ideation, concepts, you gather your references, then you start with the design blockout, then art blockout, then you basically go through passes, and the way he kind of describes his pipeline is basically do all the logical parts of the environments at one go. So you're done with the logical parts, like all the blockouts, all the checking the scales and all of that, just the architecture pass, all of that aside. Then when it comes to texturing and, working on tileable, so you can just, turn on the logic, like the art side of creative side of your brain and just fully enjoy like surf the wave in a sense. Because, like, imagine you have to, work on the art of something, then, oh God, the scale is wrong. Oh, this is not optimized. You have to work on that stuff. So basically that's, in a nutshell, a very loose description of the pipeline, but I wanted to hear from how's yours?
Yeah, I would say that's really spot on. It's always good. Like usually when I start creating a scene, like it usually starts, like if it's like for my personal project, like I would say like the antique shop, it kind of starts from like an idea or like a creative spark or something like that, like a thing that I will like, hey, it would be cool to do that. And that leads a little bit into referencing, researching for like inspiration, maybe even do on-site location scouting if it's possible. And the next thing would be to start with a really rough block out. And with that, I mean, like, yeah, you get the proportions right, you get the space, the size right. And what you learned from Thiago's workshop, it's really, really spot on, like, because you want to nail down the fundamentals of a scene early on, before you start adding detail. Because if you have a block that represents a building and then you put like some smaller cubes that would represent windows, and that's it, like super simple. You can really quickly iterate and change scale and size of any of these elements. So let's say you make a building and the proportions are off because the windows are way too low or like way too large compared to the building size. It's super easy to fix. But imagine you already put like trims in and all the textures and little curtains behind the windows and everything, right? It's going to be so much more complicated to change it. Plus, what happens very quickly, and that's something maybe digging a little bit too deep into the subject here, but there's really so what can happen is you can focus too much on details too quickly before the fundamental scene is established. And when you focus too much on a small area, then you might have this beautiful little area with all the details added. But when you zoom out a little bit, then suddenly you notice, oh, it's too small, it's too noisy, it's too crowded, or the rest of the scene is completely empty. So coming back to the blockout stuff. So once you have nailed your general overall kind of scope, scale, size, proportions, then you would move into the next level and start slowly detailing it up. So instead of focusing on one corner to bring it up to final, I would go in all the areas and bring it up a notch, right? And add more details, add some trims, start with basic texturing, and so on. And as you go, you basically add more details evenly throughout the entire scene. And nature also is, maybe you need to change the size a little bit here and there. Maybe the room or the building that you created was too large. Maybe the environment needs to be smaller, or like there's a bunch of things, that can be adjusted. Because sometimes when there is no detail, it's hard to tell the scale. But once you add in details, you maybe realize the scale. Good example is you have a big building and there are no details, so there's no stairs, no railings that would indicate a sense of scale for the player or the viewer. Problem could be that once these are added in, it starts to feel large. It's almost like when you go and see an empty apartment and then it looks small, and then you put in all your furniture and suddenly it becomes this big place. It's a little bit similar. So you kind of have to make sure that that you still be able to adjust sizes a little bit as you go. And I think it's also coming with experience. When you create your room, doesn't need to be per se a room, but your environment. That you kind of have an eye for when you create a space, that you kind of have a little bit an experience of like, okay, when I make this box this big, it will look like that in the final state. Like in your head, you're probably already a couple of steps ahead of what you're doing right now. So.
All right. And who are some of your favorite artists and designers that have inspired you the most?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. Actually, I'm pretty bad with names, so for that, if you won't mind, I can look up a name or two, but I need a moment for that, if that's cool.
Yeah, no worries. By the way, it's extremely common for everyone to not be good with names, especially artists, because we usually know the works by the style or the works of the artist, not necessarily their name,
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because I do have it's also like depending, like there's like different phases, right? Where I had like a artist that I was really into, like when I got into the industry, like many years ago, and that of course kind of changes a little bit, and there's like other artists that that kind of take their place in a way, like when I see like really inspiring artwork. It's going to be really hard to find some artwork here. But anyways, I think a couple of names that I can mention is like before I joined Naughty Dog, I knew Anthony Voccaro's work, and that was like amazing to see. It's really inspiring. That kind of pushed me to get better in that field. I think especially back then, the entire polycount community was amazing. I'm not sure. I haven't been on their website in quite a while, but that was like filled with like amazing art and workflows, and that was like a big kind of realization to see. Yeah.
All right. And any advice and tips for a good portfolio and resume for artists? Like, let's say for both mid-level, senior levels, and also for juniors as well, like all across the board, what are some of the best advice and just tips you could give, especially for juniors actually, because those are the ones who are in dire need of like portfolio tips
absolutely.
and advice?
Yeah, I think like I'm talking from purely like environment art here, because that's also like where my expertise is. But course, even if you're like a prop artist and creating assets, I think for me what's important is to really present this piece that you created, your artwork, in a great manner. Like for example, if you created like what could be a good example? Let's say you create a treasure chest. And it's a great model with all the details, with like your roughness and metallic all correctly done and really nicely sculpted wooden elements and stuff. I would love to see it in a tiny little scene. Maybe there's a shovel next to it. There's some golden coins scattered around. Like, again, like coming back to the storytelling aspect, maybe try to tell a story about it. Like, what happened here? Did someone dig it out of the sand? Was this like a nice little piece that was sit in someone's basement or something like that? Just come up with a small story and then present it a little bit. I'm not saying you have to kind of create this massive level and entire environment. Don't build like this chateau around it with all the details, right? You just want to present your chest. But sometimes I would love to see like it grounded in a little scene, like put a little floor in, a little maybe wall or so. Make sure that the details are all nicely presented. Like don't save time on lighting, for example. Make sure that the scene is nicely lit. Maybe make a small little camera pan where if you have animated aspects of your model, I don't know if there's like maybe like a fire pit or something like that, or like anything that could be animated, cloth elements or something. Make sure you capture that as well. I think that's something that I'm looking into, and also like especially as a junior, it's great to have some sort of a breakdown to see like, okay, this asset was made in a certain way. Like for example, I like to see a nice clean wireframe. To see like, hey, this is not completely kind of, I don't know, like it's not like totally crazy, and then with the topology, and then just with Dynamesh or like Siri mesh or something like reduce. It's like there's like the time spent in making the right decisions here. So that's always a good thing, and also like present these aspects in a nice, clean way. You know, not just going into Unreal, press the wireframe mode, and then present that, but maybe make a material that kind of shows the wireframe and present it in a nice way as well. I think that's something that I'm always looking for, to have this kind of little scene and some sort of a good kind of breakdown. So to know that the asset was actually made for a game environment, you know, that the artist understands what it means, because we still make games that need to run in 30 or 60 or maybe 120 frames a second. So you don't want to be wasteful, but still you want to make sure that details are still present at the right spots where they're visible. I think that's something that I'm usually looking for, and extra points, of course, if there is a little story that you're able to tell within your scene. And just to double down on that, I think it doesn't need to be like this super complex kind of twisted scene, a story. It's enough to be like, okay, there was like this guy that owned this object, and and this is his coffee table where he arranged it to look at old pictures from his family or something like that. And that alone might already be enough to arrange the scene in a way that you kind of get this sense of meaning looking at it.
Yeah, and actually, I had a question with the antique shop environment. I assume you use a lot of ready-made assets, right?
Yeah, I was using a lot of library assets. So actually, the idea from creating this shop came from the Quixel asset library, so easily accessible and available. And I'm also like here living in Orange County, Santa Ana. There's like a city called Orange, and they have like a city center where there is like, I don't know, a dozen antique shops at this space. And as we just moved here a couple of years ago, we were like exploring the space, and we went to these antique shops, walking around. And they're like massive shops with multiple floors, like you can go to the basement, and it's like filled under the ceiling with just interesting little pieces. And there's like this one shop, when you walk in, there's just walls with like hinges and locks and stuff like that. And that was basically like, well, I mean, look at the Quixel asset library. They have so many little props and assets that are awesome and highly detailed, photorealistic. That would be a cool challenge to do. And I do remember like when I was playing Uncharted 3 when it came out on the PlayStation 3. And early in the game, there's like this kind of room you walk in. And especially at the time, it was like so impressive because it was filled just over and over with like small little props and details. It was like like a storage room for antiques or something like that. And there's a combat and a puzzle in there. And it was just absolutely amazing. And at the time it was like, wow, how did I do that? That must be so expensive, like all these props and assets. And it was just in my back of my head, I guess. And I was like, well, that's I want to do something like that looks super expensive to make because there's so many little details and props and unique elements in there. But yeah, with like these library assets, so Quixel was one. There's also like the Matrix demo they released. There's like a package with like some really cool kind of hardware elements like monitors, keyboards, other detailed assets that are like really cool. Also just available for free. I always use that. I have a good friend. He lives in Ukraine, and he created a bunch of like Unreal 5 or Unreal 4 asset packs, Dennis Rutkowski. And I was like getting some of his packages too. They were like also really, really valuable, really cool, like some books, some chandeliers and stuff. Yeah. So without that, it would not be possible to finish this scene in a reasonable amount of time. Because like I'm not sure how many unique props I did, but overall it's like I don't know, almost 4,000 actors in that scene. So it's a lot.
Wow. And did you run into any optimization issues, by the way?
Thankfully, I have a really, really high-end machine here, but still, yeah. I mean, there was like this problem where texture memory was out of budget. Triangle count was actually pretty okay because it's a small room and it's obscured by a lot of kind of walls, so you don't really see too much. So the texture memory issues were quickly resolved when I converted every material and every texture into virtual textures. And because also using Nanite, which literally like just virtualized geometry, then Unreal handles most of it. And I'm still impressed today. Yes, I have I have a 3090 in my computer, but it's still like every prop has at least a 2K texture or material with like normal roughness and all these kind of pieces. And the wall textures are like 4K, like really high end, right? And I thought like I have to probably be really mindful at some point and optimize a lot. But I ended up putting textures and materials back to 2K after I optimized them too much, because now with virtual textures, Unreal handles that that problem. And since I converted not all of the textures, because some of the packages did not support virtual textures, I had to go in with some and change that, because you cannot just change the texture. You also have to go into the material and do some updates there as well to make sure that virtual textures work properly. But so there's still not everything 100% optimized, but I optimized it to a level that I didn't run into any trouble anymore with texture memory. So that was great. And it's still impressed with how well that actually worked out. But I do have to say the frame rate is not quite 30 frames. It's a little bit below that. But I think it's okay because that's mostly coming from some lighting tweaks that I maybe put a little bit too high end, but it's all right.
All right. What area besides the area you're working on right now, which is of course art related, do you got going on in your life? Like, what other hobbies, or not just hobbies, just other stuff, you got going on in your life that are completely non-art related?
Oh, completely not art related. I mean, I do like to take photographs, like I like take pictures, all different kinds. But I feel like that's also very art related in a way. So even though it's a very, very kind of different subject, but it's probably like connected to in general like traveling. But that's like such a lame answer, because like who doesn't say traveling and yeah. I mean, I think there's. Yeah, it's difficult because it usually comes down to some art or creating things. Because I really like the photogrammetry stuff that I was also like kind of picking up for this antique shop to make my own assets. But what I like about it is that it's also like very grounded in the real world. Like it's nice to pick up like actual physical objects and be able to transform them into like 3D assets. So with that, living here in Los Angeles, on this greater Los Angeles area, there's like also a lot of kind of Mexican culture. My fiance, she's a Mexican background. So we kind of also going and exploring like these kind of shops where they sell like all kind of sorts, like amazing artwork, like furniture pieces that they import from Mexico, other places of the world. And I really fall in love with doing that. Because it's not only kind of decorating a house, it's also like seeing what's available, and also in a way like getting a little bit inspired with other artists, but it's completely different matter, right? They don't care for like polycounts. They just actually make a really beautiful looking table. And it's great to see these things and explore these things in throughout the city. So there's a couple of really interesting shops that import like artworks, furniture, and so on from different parts of Mexico. And we have been lately pretty active, kind of going to these places and exploring them and check them out and get inspired for what we can do to the house here, what we can upgrade a little bit. And so I think it was kind of fun lately. Yeah, but yeah, I think when it comes to like other things that I love doing. It's like, yeah, it's a lot of like comes back to photography. And I think this also kind of pushed me a little bit to go places, because it's like great to grab a camera and have this kind of mindset. Okay, I want to take some cool pictures. I want to kind of get inspired or something like that. And yeah, just trying to kind of travel around a little bit, go to places, and always have the camera with me. Trying to come up with some good pictures. I'm not that really good, so I'm not sharing too many pictures on my social media, but I'm hopefully getting there.
All right. And what are some of your favorite games that you're currently playing? And what are some of the games that you're looking forward to play?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I have to say, like, I'm pretty much into indie games lately. I'm playing like small games. I love the Vampire Survivor kind of games when they came out. Like when Vampire Survivor came out, like it's like wow, it's like playing a lot of these super small indie game, which is like super fascinating with how crude they may look, or this particular game may look, how much fun it is, and you even really start to love the visuals of that game too, because it's so readable and it's beautiful in how I don't want to say basic because it sounds less disrespectful, because of course there's a lot of kind of work into these games as well, but it's beautiful in its simplicity. You don't need so much to make it like work as well and great. And there's a similar games called Brotato. It's kind of a funny name, but I highly recommend it. It's so much fun to play. So that's like what I played recently. There's like another game that I really loved. I'm actually not sure if it came out last year or if it came. I think it must have came out last year, end of last year, something like that. It's called Immortality. It's like an VMF game. Do I say this right? It's like basically like they shoot like real like actors, and there's like little video snippets, and you have to basically explore the snippets as a player and find clues and solve a mystery that's within this game, and that's absolutely fantastic. And even though I'm experienced gamer, I played a lot of games in my life, but this game really surprised me in a bunch of areas where I was like, wow, okay, I did not believe what just happened, kind of thing. So that's a fantastic kind of game. Yeah, and when it comes to games I'm looking for, I know like I'm so behind like these big games. Like I would love to be able to pick up Baldur's Gate 3, but I have to still play Witcher 3 to an extent. So there's a big backlog. But I think when Baldur's Gate 3 comes out, like I'm pretty for. I mean, it's out for PC, but when it comes out for consoles, I think I pick it up for the PlayStation and hopefully get my fiance to join me playing it. Like, even though I forced her a little bit at least, because it's such a. I hear so many amazing things about it, and I really want to try it out.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to make it a little bit like time together, not just sitting alone in front of the computer, as I do all the time anyways. So I'm looking forward for that.
Yeah, the thing is, because like for me as well, like I pre-ordered like Starfield like 2 months ago, so I already spent my like the money I saved for games. So then Baldur's Gate came and I was like, damn. But at the same time, I'm sure, like even with the Starfield that I have, that it's going to launch on September 6th, I think, like pretty soon actually. I'm sure I barely won't be able to get time to play it. Like I'm sure, like even though, like let's say even if I get Baldur's Gate, it's just going to go on my backlog. As you said, like damn, like playing games as an adult is like different. It's not the same.
Yeah, games became too large. I mean, it's great that they're large because you get a lot of content for your money, but I don't have that much time, and it's really intimidating if there's a game that can advertise itself, being like, "Hey, this is 100 hours, 200 hours of gameplay," and I'm like sitting there, it's like, yeah, but I don't have the time. I mean, you can always make the time, so it's not that bad. But I find myself more and more enjoying like the small games that kind of also offer something very new and exciting, even though they're not as polished or as great looking as big AAA games, maybe. But I think one other aspect that plays a role is when I play The Witcher or like another AAA open world or big game, I start looking at environments too much and see how they made it, because they're so beautiful. I want to look at the details. I want to see behind the curtain. And so I spend a lot of time doing these kind of things, and then it becomes work, and I kind of lose a little bit the just enjoyment of that. Just experience the world as a player, but rather now I'm like analyzing it as the artist, which is great inspiration, but it's not the same as just go and play the game. While Vampire Survivors, I can see how they made it, right? It's really on the surface because it's really simple, but it's just pure gameplay. It's awesome to just play it.
All right, and well, we reached the final question section of the podcast, which is called Time Capsule. And all right, let me phrase the question like this: if you could summarize some of the most important lessons you've ever learned in life, up to this point, like what are some of the and if you could summarize them in a few sentences, like what are some of the most like golden tips and advices you could give to another human being and to anyone who might listen to this podcast at any point of time in the future? What would those be? Like, what would you have to say? What do you have to say to those people?
Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty good question. So I think one thing I would say is like, if you really work hard towards a goal, there's a really good chance it's gonna be true. Of course, there's always a little bit of luck involved, and but if you don't try, if you're not really going for it, if you don't put the work in, it's not gonna happen for sure. But really going for your dream, for your goal, it's gonna work out. It might not work out the exact way you imagine, like how I wanted to be a game developer as a programmer, but now I'm making games as an environment artist. But that's okay. Like, you cannot plan your life with bullet points. You have to adjust as you go. But if you have this clear goal in your mind in the future, and you go for it, and you put the work in, and the time, and you really believe in it, it's going to work out.
All right, and that's about it. I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much for coming by for this episode, and thank you to anyone who tuned in and listened to this podcast episode as well. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, leave a comment down below if you have any suggestions, critiques, or just anything in general you want to mention. And with that being said, by the way, where can people contact you if they had any questions? Is your email address okay? That's on your ArtStation?
Yeah, I think that would be okay. Would be also okay if you reach out on LinkedIn. I think I have to say I'm horrible with answering sometimes. I'm giving my best. I'm trying, but sometimes I forget about it. So don't be mad if I forget. Just send me a reminder. I'm happy to kind of follow up on that.
Yeah, every 5-6 days, if you don't see any reply, just give it a nudge email. I mean, that's like the norm, I think, in the industry, that you're always bombarded with messages and emails and everything.
It's like great. Sometimes you get this message, and it's like, I mean, I'm in the middle of something. I cannot really answer the question or like the thing right now, but I will come back to you for sure. It's great. It's nice. I really enjoy when people reaching out, but then I forget about it because because I'm forgetful, unfortunately.
Life is
but
busy.
Get me a little reminder, and I'm like,
adultlife.exe basically.
Yeah, it's totally true.
And all right. As always, take care, everyone. Stay safe. Till next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.